And like that, he's gone.
And just like that, he's gone.
There. He's there.
Here and everywhere. And oh my Lord, here we are, folks. It is another month already. Where did January go?
I love being flanked by torsos. Look at that.
You're flanked by torsos. Yes.
You're not bad company. I feel like James Franco already in the movie.
I just love Mark's beach bod. It's pretty rocking.
Yeah, you like that. Here we go. Yeah. Woot woot.
All right.
Yes, my folks who listen to the audio only version, the background just happens so to where it looks like my head is on Selena Gomez's body, and I'm sure that'll confuse a lot of people out there. But hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spoiler Room. So glad you could join us. Yes, it's another month. January evaporated. And now we're on to February, which is Wickedly Wild month, where we're looking at films that feature females, ladies who are being a bit wild and criminal in their activities. And so tonight I figured we kick one off with a little bit more of a more recent film, kind of recent, kind of controversial, got a lot of buzz, especially when it came out. We're looking at Spring Breakers from 2012. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair and popping your favorite drink. Check this out. Look at the size of this can, 24 ounces, Malibu Splash, pineapple and coconut. You know what's hilarious? It says for sharing.
Well, you are sharing it sort of with your guests. Sorry.
I am sharing the image, but I am in Wisconsin, and this 24-ounce can, because it's spring break, we're getting wild with the Malibu. So, and getting wild with me today are a few of my wonderful crew members. First off, we have back with us, always bringing class to the Spoiler Room, none other than Mr. Jeff York. Hello, Jeff. How you doing?
Wow, thank you. It's a lot to live up to. I'll try to keep the swearing to a minimum this time.
No, you can swear it up. That's the whole point of this.
Well, this is an R-rated movie, so
excess. You need the excess. That's right. And also with us, my right-hand man, he keeps coming back for more. Always a pleasure, Mr. Ian Simmons. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing really well. It's going to be a fun show, and I'm a little bit worried for our friend Brian Sanchez over in the comments, because I might have to not talk during this episode.
Oh no.
It's gonna be an interesting show, but glad to hear. Yes, we have Brian Sanchez chiming in on our live chat already. He says hello everybody from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Ooh. Welcome, New Mexico, and a great name as well. Weird Al did a wonderful song to Albuquerque, which
that's great.
I almost memorized that whole thing. Spring Breakers, I love this movie for my opinion anyways. Spring Breakers, my score 10-10. I know a lot of people who do actually thoroughly enjoy this film. So will that be anyone on this panel tonight? Well, let's see. Mr. Jeff York, you do these so well. Would you mind giving the synopsis of Spring Breakers?
Sure. It's about 4 college girls, Britt, Candy, Cotty, and Faith. Some of the names are a little on the nose.
What? No.
Yeah, just a little bit. A lot of this movie is on the nose. But anyway, they are desperate to go to Florida for spring break, and they don't have the funds, and they're not really, in the situation where a lot of their classmates are, where they have money to sort of waste and throw around. And they decide to, Britt and Candy and Cotty decide to rob a restaurant to get the funds. So they don ski masks and they have squirt guns with them, but they look pretty realistic as squirt guns go, I guess. I don't know where you find those. They've made them super bright colors in the last 20 years to sort of keep them away from looking like real guns. But anyway, so now the girls have all this money to their name, and they drag the lovely sort of straight best friend Faith, played by Selena Gomez. It's quite the time for Selena this year as well. And they go down to St. Petersburg, Florida, where everybody is getting into all the kind of debauchery of spring break, a seemingly never-ending supply of liquor and drugs, and dare I say, promiscuity. And during one particular party, they have sort of wasted and thrown away all their money, spending it left and right, and they fall in with a character named Alien, who manages to bail them out after they get into some trouble, and then sort of takes them under their wing and sort of preys upon their already sort of suspect natures for more of debauchery, including drugs and sex, and then also leading into a sort of revenge sort of scheme that he wants to commit against his former best friend, who's now a big drug lord, and they're sort of battling over turf. So it's kind of a Girls Gone Wild meets a sort of Scorsese crime drama, if you will, although that's giving it a really big compliment, though I dare say Brian's going to love me for saying that. But that's the essence of the plot. I gave away a little bit, maybe more than half of it, because
it's the spoiler room. You can give away.
Yeah, and they do get arrested, which is really funny because they're all in their bikinis and flip flops, amongst the sort of riffraff, and yet these are attractive young women, and they're in barely nothing, and sitting there sulking it out in the pen when Alien, played by James Franco, who is and this is one of the themes that we'll get into, I'm sure, is this white guy who has visions of grandeur, of being sort of a gangsta, right down to his cornrows and his teeth, and the rack and sort of the bling on his or grill, I guess they call it.
Yes,
the grill, and sort of his whole attitude and way of speaking and stuff. And it's just I think it's a morality tale in its way, though it certainly likes to be immoral while it's getting there.
It does. Oh no, I think Brian Sanchez left. He
didn't
like the foreboding maybe we were giving.
Brian, I just gave you a pretty good I think a pretty good sense of it. Well, thank you.
No, it's a film that I know is a bit divisive. I know I remember when this came out, it was salacious. It was really got a lot of buzz, mainly because you have two, at the time, up and coming or very popular pop stars in the form of Vanessa Hudgens and Selena Gomez. Vanessa being rather popular with the younger crowd, and Selena Gomez as well. Both these folks, this is, I have a feeling this is one of those movies where they're like, we're ready for adult roles.
Well, let me build on that, if you don't mind, for a second, Mark, and I don't want to interrupt, but I think it was very conspicuous too, because it was literally like Disney Girls gone bad, because both Hudgens and Gomez made their bones on Disney projects, on the Disney Channel, High School Musical, and some of the other shows that they did. And so this was clearly a way of not only them saying, hey, we're ready for adult roles, but it was a way of, I think, challenging their audience. Mm-hmm. Maybe sort of saying, hey, these girls that you watch on television aren't young anymore, and maybe they were too old for the shows at the time. Anyway, but I mean, Zendaya did the same thing years later when she went to do Euphoria. I mean, it was a very distinct, like, I am going to break out of this goody two-shoes sort of maybe stereotype or sort of way that maybe Hollywood and maybe audiences perceive them. And that was part of the controversy at the time, because this was very raunchy and very dirty. And I mean, Vanessa Hudgens was really tramping it up throughout this entire movie. I mean, it's almost shocking when you watch it now, go like, wow. She seems like so quaint when she does the red carpet interviews, and she's done some cute projects since then, but she dyed her hair blonde and gained weight for this and was wearing next to nothing and just trashing it out throughout. But anyway, it was a very controversial movie at the time, like you said. And that was, I think, part of the intent. I think it was very much to get and sort of create a stir because of all that. And
getting into it, I didn't mean to lead into that, but I wanted to get your opinions quick. I think I know where we are with Ian. We'll get Jeff's first.
Well, I'll tell you, I at the time, I was fascinated by it, and I did not really have much expectation of it. I wasn't that familiar with the girls or the filmmaker. I will tell you this. It was sort of, I don't want to say mesmerizing, but it felt like a fever dream to me. Like, it was very weird and kind of dreamy and trippy, and, the lights, and there wasn't a lot of dialogue in it. And yet I knew that it was edgy too. And I felt that it was trying to be very kind of itself gangster in the way it was sort of portraying these characters and using the hip hop music and stuff like that. I do remember having some questions about all that sort of Black culture appropriation in it, even more so watching it the other day preparing for this show. But at the time, I knew that it wasn't a great film, but it certainly was a mesmerizing sort of fascinating film to watch. I found it never dull, and it made me think a lot about what's going on here and what's sort of it's trying to say and things like that. But I also think it's a little, in hindsight now, how many years later, it looks a little obvious and maybe a little even cheap in some of its manipulations and stuff like that. But I think, like I said, there seemed to be an attempt to sort of ask what was gained by these girls doing that. Is this their baptism of fire? Is this one of those coming of age kind of stories? Yeah, in both of those respects, I think so. But at the same time, what I was left with then and I was left with now is, other than the Gomez character, I'm not sure these girls were good to begin with. I think they were pretty badass, and I'm not sure if maybe they just found their happy home in a way. And I'm not sure they learned much from this, except maybe how to do it in a professional sort of make more money and drive away with a Lamborghini kind of way. But other than Faith going home because she realizes she doesn't want to do this, and she is a sort of good, upstanding Hispanic Catholic girl named Faith. The other three are a little on the hopeless side.
Yeah.
Which isn't a good commentary about America's youth, but I think that may indeed have been the director's intent with this commentary here. You tell me.
Yeah, I have some opinions, and I want to get Ian's initial feelings with Spring Breakers, and then we'll dive into that more, what you're saying, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it twice. Once when it came out in the theater, and then the other this morning.
That's an eye opener.
Well, I hated Spring Breakers when I saw it in theater. I was anticipating it because I liked James Franco. One of the other Disney people that we didn't talk about who's in this cast, and she's Disney almost like by second cousin corporate association, is Ashley Benson, who played
that's
Brit.
right.
She was on an ABC Family show called Pretty Little Liars, which was a really good show for the first couple seasons. And that was another one where that show had a bit more edge. It was kind of like almost like a Scream, kind of like a Who's Killing the High School Girls kind of a thing. So she was not trying to shake something off as much, but I felt like this was her trying to say, I can do more than just TV. I can also do kind of darker material on film. But Harmony Korine, who directed, I think, and wrote this movie, wrote Kids in 1995, directed by Larry Clark. And that was a movie that I loved. I can't watch it again, but it's it's very much a kind of a cinema verite, day in the life of these New York kind of reprobates. Very much a companion film to this movie, and I feel like this movie could have used Spring Breakers could have used a little bit more kids in it, not actual kids, but the movie kids.
Right,
you'll really get to spend time with those characters and kind of see who they are before they get into all this trouble. This movie, Jeff, you're right. They're college girls, but at least two of them, the two that kind of get away at the end in that Lamborghini, they're like monstrous, but you don't quite know where it's coming from. You get the feeling that restaurant job was not the first time they've done this. So why haven't they? They're complaining about how they don't want to get stuck in this town and live these nowhere lives. Those aren't the seeds that have been planted in at least two of these girls. You're like, why haven't they gone to a big city, or have they pulled more jobs? Why are they so poor if they have this in them? There's no sense of hesitation or remorse. They do this job and they're like screaming and giggling and laughing all the way down to Florida. So I don't really know who they are. Watching it again, it annoys me for different reasons. Like they keep they keep coming back to the same beach shot to show all the Florida partying, but it really is just the same crowd of people you see in the very beginning, but from different angles. It's like,
Yeah,
I recognize those boobs. But
it was shot on a budget for sure.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Make as much of those group shots as we can. We're repurposing them. Yes, but we've blown it up 2 fields. Come on.
Yeah, but it also like some of the choices, they are choices like this continuous shocking sound effect of a gun racking, as you change, scenes, and when something important happens like that,
Yeah.
It's obnoxious, but it's also artistic, and I think that the second half of this movie is much stronger than the first because these party girls do realize that they're kind of in too deep with this alien character, and we learn more about him. And it's one of those things where he is a very dangerous person, but he's also completely ridiculous, which is, you don't want to cross him, but also you're like, what that whole beautiful scene where they're in his place, and it's what I'll call the "look at my shit" soliloquy, where he's talking about, I got blue underwear, I got guns, I got shurikens.
Yeah.
Like it's really wild. And I also like the fact that when they go on this Scarface-esque raid against his enemy at the end, they're walking down this absurdly long pier to the property, and all of a sudden, Alien's just dead. He gets one.
I love it. Yeah, I love that.
He's out right away. He's like Steven Seagal in Executive Decision.
Well, right.
Gone
Minus the
before.
heroism.
What, is this the end? This is
well, it
minus the heroism.
It made sense though, in a way.
Well,
because he was, it kind of goes with, I think you were saying, Jeff and Ian, both about our girls, at least the 2 that are left in the end, because Faith checks out and Alien lets her go, which was a surprise. I liked that angle with his character, that he's like, okay, all right, I understand, you can go, after a little bit, and a little bit of not too somewhat aggressive persuasion, but still he lets her go. And then who is it? Cotty ends up taking a bullet from Alien's buddy, who does a drive-by, and then she's like, this is just too much, and he's like, okay, I'll let you go. But then we've have Britt and Candy, who have been wild from the start, and if you watch the film's really about them, and they're always actually the ones in power, which is interesting watching. Now, this is my first time watching it. I didn't see it when it came out. This was one of those that it was always on my list, but I'm like, I'll come back to it. Oh, I'll come back to it. And here we are 12, 13 years later. I've finally come back to it off of the list to watch it, which is one of the reasons I wanted to put it on the list. And I agree with Ian. The second half of this film is far better than the first half. When the director comes from a music video background, and you mentioning, I didn't even pick up that this was the same person that wrote Kids, but I was watching, this was like,
I'm watching Gummo too.
Yeah, and he did Gummo, but watching it, I'm like, this has a Kids vibe to it, but it's like a lot more, it's the Spring Break energy, the more of a music video meets Kids. And it had kind of an Natural Born Killers angle to it, as far as its approach to the way many of the scenes are shot. Because if you look at Natural Born Killers, I appreciated Natural Born Killers quite a bit, but if you look at it, it's not shot like a fairly regular narrative, say like Kids was, and this is shot more, I don't know how you want to play,
almost documentary, handheld and up close and personal, kind of like.
Right. But it's edited like a music video, almost like MTV, Spring Break type of thing for most of it. You get interesting camera lenses, you get it blown out, you get it fuzzy, you get, different, you get timeline broken up, but not like to the Nolan degree.
And so much slow motion, like booty flesh.
Much booty flesh. Well, I think that's what the filmmaker was trying to go for, was the excess of youth, how youth overcompensates when they go to spring break, because I think that's what he was going for. Now, I'm not saying it was done as sharp as, say, Kids was, but I think they're trying to make that statement of youth, of going, the kids are so bored in their lives, they aren't finding the excitement, so they go to spring break and they overdo it. And these folks overdo it to the nth degree, except for our two who are left at the end, who really, from the beginning, manipulated the other two to go with them to spring break. They manipulated Faith to come with them. They took, they were the guys inviting the kids to the amusement park, and then when they get to the amusement park, they turn into donkeys like in Pinocchio. I mean, that's what these two are, I think.
It's interesting too when you talked about Scarface. That's always on in the background, and as of course we know, Oliver Stone wrote that. Brian De Palma directed this. Is this
right.
This ginormous morality tale, right? The world is yours, and Tony throws it all away and gets high in his own supply. And the only one who kind of escapes with any kind of integrity is the Michelle Pfeiffer character. Everyone else kind of goes down in flames. But that movie became worshipped by culture. And well, we want to be like Tony Montana. That's the right idea. That's what we were all going for. And Alien is going for that too. There's also, I think, a key line when they're going to do that first robbery. They talk about going at, like, pretend it's in a video game.
Right.
For these people, the music videos and the video games and the constant pop culture, just noise and editing and fancy, sexy visuals and lights and all that keeps blurring around them. And I think the director was going sort of for that same effect here, to make it all this sort of heady mix that they don't even see the forest for the trees, or the danger for the excitement. Can I just throw in one thing too? And I know this is maybe early on, I don't want to get super heavy, but no. I remembered when I was watching this the second time, I had a kind of a blood curdle, not chilling moment, but a little bit like, I forgot that I remembered thinking that, and it came back to me as the girls reminded me a little bit of the Manson girls. And the reason for that is that, they've got this kind of charismatic leader with Alien, and he can be kind of charming and kind of sweet. And you kind of think that maybe he's all bluster, that I think Manson was a lot of bluster. Like, he'd always turn on the crazy act when Geraldo or Diane Sawyer would show up and do his little dance and all that shit. But the really scary people are the people he sent out. And one of the things that Vincent Bugliosi said in his book, Helter Skelter, is like, there was something about those girls that he recognized in them as dangerous. And that's why he tapped them. Because to go out and do that, you're 19, and I want you to go and kill these people and stab them. And one woman is pregnant. I don't want to get too dark here, but just those women were dark characters before Manson even handed them the knives and told them to go do something witchy. They were bad people. They were looking for something to tap into, maybe that anger or that resentment of the man or their parents or whatever it was. Counterculture was, sort of escaping the norms. And here I think it's funny because it doesn't suggest that those girls are poor, but to your very good point, Ian, those girls are probably bad and have done these kind of things before, and God knows what else they've done. I mean, I'm sure, they probably cheated and, in school and stole things and who knows what, but I mean, they're not good people. And they kind of, and I think in a way, like Manson, Alien maybe sort of tapped into that, knowing that these girls could do this shit for him.
Well, yeah. I mean, go ahead, Ian. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting because, something I didn't pick up on is Alien's kind of his version of a long game, because he picked out these 4 girls. He figured he probably needed some kind of an army or a crew to go up against his rival.
Right.
But he goes through this process of weeding out the weak ones and figuring out who really are the hardcore psychos.
Right.
Because with Faith, there's that I think it's a great scene between James Franco and Selena Gomez where she's like, freaking out, and he's kind of trying to charm her and everything.
Right.
He's very carefully letting her go, but manipulating her to say, yeah, you can go, but you're going to go back to your small town. You're going to think back, what did I miss? You're going to think about that for the rest of your life. But she really is insistent, and she's got her, Faith, that compels her to go. and that gets her. It also cleverly, I think, links back to her pastor had said something in the beginning of the film, some quote from scripture about, whenever there's a temptation or a dark path, God always gives you a way out.
Mhm.
And she uses that. She recognizes that, I think. But he realizes that she's not hardcore enough by any stretch. So she's a liability. If he brings her along in this thing, she might crumple to the ground and start crying when the bullets start flying. As far as Cotty goes, she had that kind of killer instinct thing and that brutality, but she also got shot and injured. Again, not
collateral damage.
Fight. Right. She can heal eventually, but this attack has to happen now. So he got her essentially to go on a bus, or the other girls kind of convinced her to leave. And so he's left with the two hardcore girls. The one thing I will say that still bugs me about this, Mark, you love to use the term plot armor. These girls had their plot armor was their bikinis.
Oh yeah,
because when they go into this compound, there are people shooting at them at close range, and they unscathed, and they drive away with the money in the Lamborghini after killing everybody else in that compound.
Oh no, I fully recognize the plot armor, but with the type of story this is, I kind of expected that, because these two, in the end, we get, as you both mentioned, the two hardcore. They even end up being more hardcore than Alien.
Oh yeah.
In fact, where Alien, and again, it was surprising me once we get into the dynamic between them and Alien, the film really picks up, and I think it starts getting into the kind of the meat of things. Because up until then, it is just girls gone wild, literally, like just like you're just like. Okay,
but it does start with that robbery, which shows that
which it starts with the robbery.
The light is the fuse has already been lit in a way.
Right, but the robbery is really the brainchild of the two that we see at the very end, and they really use their friends as an excuse to party it up and get together to go to spring break. Then while they're down there, they decide, initially they don't have any money because they're just wearing their bikinis, though I don't think the law would just I think they would give them some kind of scrubs or something to wear, but that's who knows, because they were going to have to hold up 2 days. They weren't going to nail them with the drugs, but they were still going to nail them for 2 days and hold them in the pen or pay the fine. And they were just going to stay whatever. And then when Alien bails them out, our two girls see this as an opportunity to work their way into the life that they have always wanted to have, as what was shown when they robbed the cafe, because they were the two most violent ones. And even you get that scene later on where they're with their friends in the parking lot, and those two reenact about getting down on the ground, and their friends are
Cotty, who is the one who was on her knees. That's right.
Yeah.
Right. They got Cotty on her knees, and Faith is like, come on, guys, you're going a little far. And those two, Britt and Candy, are serious almost in their tone. It almost feels like they're not playing. They're almost
that's why I think they were super scary, like the Manson girls. Like it's there, you can see it in them. And even when they're like seducing him and they're in the pool, and it's like, are they going to kill him? Are they just going to off him right here? Because they seem in total control of it. And it seems like it's all just part of their almost Black Widow, Kiss of the Spider Woman kind of stuff with their sexuality. And there's no real line between, hey, I'm a girl who puts out, and I'm a girl who puts out and will cut your throat.
Well, that's like when Alien goes down, there's no moment of them crying or reacting. They just keep walking, and they shoot the guy who shot Alien. They do, one of them at least kind of leans down to kind of kiss his corpse as they're walking back after they've
won
the money. Right. But you're right. They're stone cold, and it's really chilling. It's funny because Emma Roberts, I read, was supposed to be in this movie, but she dropped out when she found out there was going to be that kind of pool threesome. She was like, no, that's a bridge too far.
Well, for her back then. Well, back later on, but but no, it is interesting. I didn't expect it to be about those two, and especially talking with you gentlemen here, it really comes into focus that it is kind of those two manipulate. And it's interesting their behavior too, because while they are acting wild and promiscuous at times, as far as when it comes to sex with guys, the only time we actually ever see evidence of them actually getting with a guy is with Alien. Until then, they're with guys, they're teasing, they're kissing guys, that, you know, they're being flirtatious, they're being a little forward, but we don't see them actually spending time with actually any actual guy, you know, picking up any actual guys. And in fact, when we see guys maybe try to get a little aggressive or forward with their sex, you know, propositioning about sex, and we see this especially with Alien, those two girls, their performance is actually very well done, because suddenly it's like a switch. You get that bedroom scene where Alien's like, oh, hey, girls, you know, he's like kind of trying to take control, like, hey, and then they've got the two guns and then they're pointing them at him and like down. And they become the dominant ones in that sexual dynamic. And I'm just like, but the switch flipped.
But see, I'm wondering too, do you think, guys, that really, if at the end of the day, if you said to the girls, are you interested in sex, or at least the two really hardcore ones, I'm not so sure, other than maybe it's a use of their power to gain more power. I mean, I think that's sort of what you're getting at a little bit with, it's not like, hey, let's go down to meet boys and, you know, maybe fall in love and all that. I'm not so sure that's their agenda. I think their bikinis, their sexuality, they're flaunting their bodies, and even, you know, when they're making love with Alien and playing in the pool and all that, I think it's a little bit more about, we're in control. We're taking sort of charge, in kind of a way that goes beyond just whether they feel any need to be loved or held or made love to, whatever you want to call it.
I think there's something in between all of that, because yeah, you're right, Mark, they don't seem to have much interest beyond partying,
right.
You know, and there happen to be a bunch of, you know, half naked guys at all these parties, as there, you know, are in any kind of beach, you know, wild beach scene. And then there is the one guy who's getting kind of frisky with Cotty, and she's getting, you know, more and more drunk. But I will say, with Alien in the pool, you know, they are having lots of sex, you know, the last three of them. And he says, I think I'm in love with y'all. And then one of them says, we think we're in love with you too. I genuinely believe that. I believe that they were in love, the closest approximation of what they understand love to be. I think that they responded to Alien because he's kind of the alpha male badass. He has everything that they've always wanted and aspired to, you know, money, power, probably guns, and this ferocious, don't give a shit attitude. But that version of love is still subsidiary to all that material stuff. That's why they don't cry when he dies. That's why they go in, they complete the mission, they take, I have to assume that the trunk of that Lambo is full of cash and jewels or something, because we never actually see them take anything out of there. We just see them driving away.
I think they take Alien's stuff. They don't take his stuff. I think they take Alien's cash, because he had a bed full of cash. He had all kinds of money and such. I don't think they take the
they'd be silly not to. I mean,
they would be silly not to, but
right.
and they might. We don't.
I imagine them having a great scene afterwards where they're negotiating with some guy really hardcore about what the price is for that, you know, seldom driven Lamborghini. We're not taking anything less than 150.
Mm-hmm. I would say
it's orange. It's pristine. It's a sweet ride, guy.
Was that Alien's car?
I think,
or was that the other guy's car?
No, I think it was Alien's car.
I think it was the Alien's car.
That's what that's yeah.
Because I couldn't remember. I'm just thinking about the scene where the drive up scene where Cotty got shot. There was an orange car. Then there was the car that Alien had. I can't remember if that was the orange one. I just remember it had a giant green glowing alien head on the back that I just loved. But I will say, if this movie had had more money, or you know, even if someone had thought about this, that video game comment that you mentioned, Jeff, I think is very key, and it would have been really cool to see a callback to that at the end, because when they break into the gangster's house and he's in his hot tub with two naked girls like pleasuring themselves in the walk-in shower, he's just sitting there, like the music's blaring and everything. He says something, I don't think we can quite hear it, but we see his mouth. He's like, basically, get the fuck out of here. Who are you? And then they shoot him. It would have been interesting if we saw just for a second him from their point of view, and he was kind of rendered in like PlayStation 2 graphics, because I get the feeling that they have pulled other heists, knocked things over. And we do get a little bit of that with a montage during the Britney Spears song of them doing kind of other jobs, but I don't get the feeling they've killed anyone before. They don't seem like and there was there's no reaction, there's no aftermath to it. They go right from plugging him to driving away in the car. And that's
the final thing, because up until then they were just putting their guns to people's head and taking the power. And for them, again, we mentioned it's power with those two throughout it, the way they're dynamic amongst their friends, amongst any guys that they happen to have come by them. They're even with Alien, they may say they think they're in love with Alien, Alien's in love with them. I think they like Alien because Alien is this alpha male who you get that scene in the bedroom, like I said, where they kind of emasculate him and they have the guns, where he was open to that and he actually kind of let them have the power. And I think that appealed to him more than like love, but the fact that they like this guy because here's a guy who's willing to do what they say. They've run into guys up until then who have kind of like, oh, come on, they reject them and the guys are still kind of pushy. And here they tell Alien, in the bed or whatnot, this is what we're doing. And he's like, after a little bit, he's like, yeah, okay. And so he's kind of, submissive to them in a way. And I think that was their appeal to him. And yeah, at the end when they raid his enemy's home and start blasting people, that is their final, say, test or whatever, or their final thing that they wanted to do, I think. And that's why, at that point they were just all in, and these two are scary individuals at the end of the film. I mean, they are more scary than some other folks you meet. And I didn't expect that at all either.
The second time I watched it, today, I wondered about, as they're driving away in that, car, what are they going to do next? Right. Because there was a part of me that thought, is this going to be like because the movie is called Spring Breakers. It's about people going down to Florida and cutting loose. And it's the cliche of like, oh, those wild times we had back when we were teenagers, now that we're settled down in suburbia or whatever. There's a part of me that wondered, is that going to be what they do? Like they've got enough money to set themselves up and move out of their boring town finally and just like become something else? Or are they going to become the female Mickey and Mallory and do the natural born killers thing? I don't know. I was really interested at the end of this movie in these characters more than I was in most of the scenes leading up to it, strangely enough.
But see, it's interesting. I think that's a good question. And I think even though, we can debate the flaws and sort of the whether or not the film is trying to present shallowness or itself is maybe somewhat shallow. I think those kind of moments are really interesting because I walked out of the movie with a friend who I saw it with, and we talked a lot about, well, what do they do now and where do they go? It reminded me a little bit of The Graduate at the end when they get on the bus and, it's like they're not just super giddy and happy. It's like, oh shit, now what do we do? And it kind of starts to wash over them and they're like, well, we're still back to kind of being disaffected and dissatisfied youth. That might be literally what's happening here because they don't seem to be crying or exalting in it or anything like that. Maybe they resort back to who they were. There's that phone call that almost suggests, hey, we're coming home. We've done this now. I don't know. Did they just get it out of their system? But I think it's scary that they could even change back rather quickly and not be affected by it as much as whether or not they choose to go on and become, natural born killers and continue to be criminals and stuff like that. The Manson girls all went back to the ranch too, and they weren't caught for another 8 months. So you think about all the shit that they did, and somehow they went to bed every night and woke up and never tried to escape, even though they said, well, he manipulated me and he did all this to me. It's like, yeah, but he knew that you could do it. But it's interesting too, because I think for them, the mix, and even maybe for Alien, is it all is this, cacophony of noise and bodies and youth and sex and devil may care and video games and gangster sort of influence and appropriation and sex, drugs, and rock and roll, all those things that we're told are the coolest things to be, right? We've been having that. I mean, Fonzie is, he's a thug, he's a hood, and yet he's the breakout star of Happy Days. It's like Richie Cunningham, yawn. Let's make it all about Fonzie, and he wasn't that the first season, but so they're kind of living the whole world of this, what we're been fed really since MTV, since kind of a lot of things that happened in the 60s and 70s, and they're sort of, it's all almost baked into them already. I think, like, this is the cool stuff. This is the shit. I don't want to fall in love. I want to get a big car and $1 million and maybe kill somebody. What would that feel like? No orgasm is going to be better than that. I mean, that's what the Manson girls were saying. Like, it was so wonderful taking the power away from these people. It's like, wow, there you go.
Yeah, it's weird because during the scene where Alien was showing off all of his stuff in his room, I kept wondering if he would ever come to a point of realization, like, what is he going to do with all this stuff and this money? It goes back to the Clockwork Orange thing.
Yeah,
what are you going to do with the big money? It's like,
well, one of the interesting things they have is a conversation with his one-time friend and now enemy. Archie, Archie, yeah, you still get the
Gucci
feeling.
Mane. The rapper Gucci Mane played him.
Yeah. And I liked his character quite a bit because he's the real deal. And Franco, I mean, you can see why he got nominated for many awards. They tried to get him to be the Oscars, but linked to our wonderful panel here, Mr. James Franco did get nominated by, where is it? Chicago Film Critics Association Awards gave Franco Best Supporting Actor and nominee, and nominated for Best Original Score Cliff Martinez for this movie. But Franco is
that was the year before I joined.
And my critics group wasn't in existence then. By the way, this was one of the first big A24 movies too.
It is the first feature. It's their first feature before they went on to do Lady Bird and others. So they were cutting their teeth on this as well. And to become the A24 we know now. And that's the thing, is it feels like when it said A24 at the beginning, I'm like, and then I watched it at the end, I'm like, yep, that was an A24 film, because they are different. They still are the indie house of sort. They do these films that are at least a little bit more indie in spirit and artistic, and it may not appeal to everyone, but they're still pushing it and wide releasing it and campaigning it like a studio. And they're
not looking for the four quadrants,
right? Yeah,
the way every other studio in Tinseltown is still, and they don't get that.
No, and this
very well with a certain half of those without necessarily having to make it for everybody.
And getting James Franco in here is great. I mean, he can get into his characters as he does in here. You forget that that's Franco, in all honesty. Unless, when he has the shades on, you don't even recognize him. It's until he takes the shades off, then you kind of, okay, now I see Franco, kind of his face, but he's still Alien. But where I was going with this is that his Alien character even feels like he's playing a gangster this whole time. His buddy's the real gangster, and his buddy, who is now his enemy, quote unquote, is allowing so much rope for Alien to play as gangster, but Alien starts to take it too far, and that's where their beef comes in, and that's where things get bloody. But up until then, he was giving Alien some rope and going, all right, I'll let you play gangster. You were the only white guy in the neighborhood, as Alien mentioned it. I'll let you do some of this. He letting him play gangster, but you never really feel like he was established as an actual gangster. Like no one really took him seriously. Like he was a petty thug. He was middleman.
And yet he surrounds himself with a black crew, and his dialect, his look, his whole thing
Right.
is, sort of trying to, vamp the almost sort of behavior and even, the cliche stereotypes of urban culture as it became known, because we didn't know what to call it sometimes, and it was taking over music. And I remember when rap first came out, people said, "Oh, it's a phase." It's like it's the number one form of pop music right now, and it still has been for almost 30 years. And I just think that there's an interesting. It's almost like he wants to be black. Like that's the ultimate in cool. And in some respects, when they're shooting at the end and it's under that black light, and their bikinis are day glow. Yet their flesh, when they're running around, they look as black as the guys they're shooting, which is, I'm sure, intentional, because I think it's a little bit about this fantasy world that they think they're stepping into of cool, and you're the neatest person, without necessarily realizing a number of comments that it might be making, and sort of what culture has done with these things is turning them into there's black culture, then there's gangster culture. And I think in some respects, a lot of people don't really see the ramifications of either. And it's hip, cool stuff without necessarily sitting down to think about exactly what we think it's saying to us.
Well, that goes back to Scarface too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, apologies, guys. I think something happened to my internet. I blanked out for like a minute, so I missed part of the conversation. No, the thing that with Alien, I apologize if this point was made while I was gone, but Mark, you're talking about him putting on a persona when he is in that scene with Selena Gomez where he's talking about her leaving. You almost get the feeling or the sense that he's dropped the accent. Almost, he's talking much more hushed tones.
Yeah.
He sounds a lot more like James Franco in that scene. But then when he's kind of getting up on her and using the charm, the alien kind of slips back in. It's a very good, very nuanced performance.
Well, he doesn't, his character in some respects, I think maybe what you're saying and what I was sort of getting at, albeit a little bit longer than I'm going to say it right now, is I think they see the play acting of this sort of world of rap music and MTV and all this kind of stuff, and they don't necessarily think of it beyond, oh, that's the coolest thing to be, like that's the hip way to be, and we all would be. I mean, Alien talks about growing up in St. Petersburg, the only white kid in school, and he thought he was cool when he was in the pool hall with young black men and stuff, and so he's growing up thinking that that's the coolest thing to be. And I think MTV has certainly pushed some of that, as well as other kinds of things with sort of all those things that I'm not sure these people even really have thought about deeply, other than we're sort of told that this is the neatest thing to be.
Yeah, I mean,
fashion and music and things like that.
I don't think it's that it's told that it's needed to be, but for him, where the impression you get from when he grew up is he saw what these guys, what the folks around him were doing, and the respect or whatnot, for lack of sounding like Tony Montoya, but the respect that they were gaining, and it looked like that they were in control. They had all the advantages because they were leading this life. So he wanted to lead that life because he wanted some of that, but it wasn't genuine. It almost deep down, it almost felt not genuine with him. It felt like he was doing this just because he thought, okay, this was not the easy way, but this is where the way you go about this, right? You go about it this way, like he's reading the script rather than living it.
I don't know. I hear what you guys are saying, but I don't necessarily know that I quite agree. Now it's ambiguous because we only know about Alien what Alien tells us in the movie.
Right. True.
But I would think of it more almost like Eminem from 8 Mile. It's he might as well be black himself because he grew up in a community where he was the only white person there. But if those were, and I don't know anything about his home life or his parents, but if that was the culture that he grew up in, I would think that Alien is pretty much the same person as Archie. It's not that he's trying to aspire or build something that he's not. In fact, Archie took him under his wing and mentored him in the ways of this lifestyle, which he would have done for probably anybody young black man that he, kid that he grew up with. It's just the waters that they swim in. I think it's because James Franco is, a white actor playing this white character. We're ascribing certain things to him, possibilities, but I don't know that that's necessarily the truth.
I think it might be part of that, and also we might be getting that vibe because if you look at how Archie and his group are, and how Alien feels like he may be almost overcompensating, so that may be where it's coming off as a disingenuine
or excessiveness.
He's very more excessive, and he seems more flamboyant almost in his lifestyle and his portrayal and how he's dressing and his style and everything than his Archie and then his his peers who.
Well, I mean, in fairness, we don't see much of Archie and his peers except for them in the club. We see him, Archie in the hot tub and everything. And I think the overconfidence is when Alien is in that club. This is before the drive-by shooting. You see him get a little bit nervous when Archie's like, you're coming up into my territory. You're bringing these strange people here. I don't care about you because you're betraying me and you're trying to muscle on my turf. And Alien looks scared. You can see the mask kind of slipping. Right. But again, you feel like a week ago or a month ago, they were probably all hanging out together.
True.
I just want to mention, because I know we're kind of winding down, but my biggest complaint about this movie. Well, first of all, I want to make a recommendation to folks. I think the better version of this movie, it's very different, but in some ways, the point it's trying to get across in this movie is better. And Larry Clark, he made another movie in 2001 called Bully with Nick Stahl and Brad Renfro, and it was based on a true story. Yes, it's devastating, especially because it is based on a true story. But it's basically about these kids are just hanging out. Parents aren't around. All they do is like drugs and sleep with each other. But Nick Stahl plays this guy he bullies everybody in his friend group. And the friend group eventually gets fed up with it and they conspire to Julius Caesar him essentially. And then there's the cover up in the aftermath and the trial. I think that movie says a lot that Spring Breakers is trying to say, but Spring Breakers, whatever message it has, gets lost in the aesthetics. Maybe that's the point. But the other thing I want to say is what rubbed me the wrong way about this, and yes, it's going to be completely prurient and low form, but you have the promise of these Disney Channel stars who are all 18, 19, 20 now, and they're in this movie where everyone's having sex and doing drugs. And like, there's that promise like, oh, you're going to see something. But the only one who really gets naked is the actress Rachel Carine, who is Harmony Korine's wife. And there's that kind of a tease that like, hey, I'm going to be edgy and adult. And like, yeah, but you're not really. And it just, it's like a PG-13 cop out in a very hard R-rated movie. It's very strange.
Well, to that very point, this is a whole nother maybe topic for either one of your wonderful shows, but it always, to that point, always bothered me in like Sex and the City that Sarah Jessica Parker was constantly shown in bed with different lovers and she always wore a bra to bed, because she wasn't willing to do the nudity. And I'm not saying that that's going to make or break a scene, but it's kind of false when your topic is that. And I think to some degree here, you're aware of them not doing it when it's so much about that kind of stuff. And it's like, they won't quite go that far, but at the same time, it's also, to your point, kind of a silly prudence because as Richard Mulligan told Julie Andrews in SOB in 1981, there's a whole slew of great actresses who have done it, from Vanessa Redgrave to Jane Fonda to Liv Ullmann. I don't know if you remember that scene, and then Julie Andrews did it. So what's the big deal? I'm not saying that we're all waiting for Disney princesses to expose themselves, but if they don't go, they pull their punch a little bit.
Yeah.
To your point.
Well, this took a really awkward conversational turn.
I think we used the best language we could possibly, Mark, knowing that both Ian and I oftentimes descend into the hoariest of ones, and I do mean hoary.
No, see, here's the thing, though. It is in the marketing that they were promising, and I get what you're saying. No, it's not that we need to see them. We don't need to see them like that, but it is in the marketing and the way they play it up.
Yeah.
When I remember when they were selling this film, that was the whole kind of, oh, they're getting, they're very edgy in that. But when you watch in the film, the way their characters are, it makes sense that they actually aren't in some ways, except for Candy and for for Britt, it for them, they reveal and they get as wild as they're allowing themselves to, because they do still have, even if anything, at least two of them, a bit of a subconscious wall. I mean, Faith is Faith. She's going to be reluctant on just about anything that's not like, hey, I'm going to have some drinks and we're just going to chill in the pool, and no, we're doing lines of cocaine. Wait, what? Faith is going to be the most pure one. And then Cotty is the one who is the in-between of Faith and Candy and Britt. She's the in-between, to where she kind of wants to be like Candy and Britt to a point, but she has a wall that she hits as well. Either when they're in a group, she gets only so wild or whatnot, and reveals, And so as far as their characters and within the context of the film, I think it fit. But as far as the marketing goes, the way they were selling this is like, oh, these, they've been in these innocent roles, but now they're in this, they're showgirls. Well, it's literally Elizabeth Berkley in Showgirl.
Well, and all the press for it, all the publicity stills and pictures were of them in their bikinis looking trampy and, kind of flaunting it and stuff. And it's funny because, on surface, that's kind of a big deal here in a way, because a lot of times when you'll see celebrities in swimsuits and bikinis, they're not in them long in movies. They become a Mr. Skin 8 seconds, and that's what people pay for that website for. But here they're in it for a long portion.
Most of it,
most of it, even when they're in jail and they're just sitting around, it's like, well, these four are in nothing, and we have to, that's sort of exposing them even in that strange way. But I think the sort of cleverness, or maybe the real sort of impact of this film, is that you kind of get used to that, and it doesn't seem that impressive and maybe that startling after a while, and maybe you're waiting it to get a little bit more risque, which it doesn't. But I think by then the psychological takes over so much over the physical that the physical doesn't matter anymore. Even when they're doing all the shooting in their bikinis with the ski masks on, and that became a popular Halloween costume for a couple of years, and they've done homage.
Well, you forget
that's in other shows. The scary part about that is not, they don't have much body armor on, they're not protective. It's like, nope, they're just picking up those Uzis and mowing everybody down without even a hesitation.
Yeah, there is absolutely no fear to them. When they start walking on that pier, that's it. They don't care. I mean, we've talked about, they don't care about Alien or anything. They're there to do one thing, and that is to kill people, because this is the one thing we haven't seen them do yet. They've intimidated people. They've taken control of a gangster basically, and made them, made him theirs pretty much. And they've set out and done just about everything they kind of wanted to do on Spring Break, except this last thing was the final almost test for them, and they just walk in there with so much confidence that, on one hand, plot armor up the, it's like, these guys are that bad a shot? I don't think so. On the other hand, though, for the type of film and story that it is for these two characters, I get it. But yeah, it is interesting that from when they're arrested, after they get picked up for being wild at that party, to pretty much the end, I don't think we really see them in clothes outside of bikinis usually after that. So you forget, and you're right, Jeff. And I think it's done obviously deliberately to kind of desensitize yourself. Up until then, we've been giving not only images of them in their, bikinis or being wild, but just younger folks, college kids in general being salacious and wild and getting, guys and girls, everybody's just ripping off clothing and just having a wild time. And then as the movie goes on, they never really change into regular clothes, into, full clothes. But after a while, you forget that that's just their character after a while. And so it becomes something else, I think, than what they lead you to with camera angles and such in the beginning, because there are a lot of booty shots in the beginning, in the first half of this film. But after they get arrested and Alien picks them up, camera angles on them change a bit. They're handled differently, I think. And while I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying I think the idea is that after a while you forget that they're always in the bikini, because that's now just them. That's just,
Well,
they were less
until you get to the.
Of course, yeah.
But even there, I found all of that, but the characters by that point, I was not lusting for or looking at as like, oh, they're beautiful women, or wow, these are sexy young things. Is like, these people are terrifying. These people are bad people.
well,
I would not want to party with them. I wouldn't want to. Be in the jail cell with them. I'm not sure what they could do in the jail cell.
Franco's looking pretty good in the pool too, but at that point, it's like when they have that scene, that intimate scene, quote unquote, in the pool, you're looking at this going, okay, how is this going to be a power play? How are they, at this point, I don't really care about the intimacy of the scene.
Be forever in your favor.
Yeah, I don't care about the intimacy or whatever is going on with the scene or the fact that they're naked in a pool or whatnot. I'm focused on, okay, what do they say to each other? And where is this power play of convincing them to go on this mission of, destruction?
See, the funny thing too is, and I dare say, just as I know we're wrapping up too, but with the ending, I remember sitting there watching it the first time. I'd forgotten this when I watched it a second time. But when I watched it the first time, I thought to myself, they're getting close. Faith realized she had to get out of it because it's going to be dangerous. The one Cotty gets shot, and she could have been killed. One of them is going to die. Nope. In fact, James Franco dies, and they kill everybody else. And it's like, wow, I did not see that coming. I did not know that's exactly where they're going to go. But it makes sense in the sense of like they're so immoral, and they haven't sort of looked back or blinked since they got down to Florida, even going to jail for that night. So it's like, of course they'd be able to rise to the occasion and slaughter a whole crew. Why not?
Oh, well, apparently the original ending, the girls were supposed to get arrested and put in jail, the two, apparently.
Really?
Yeah, which in all honesty, while I get that, the ending you get here fits the rest of the film, especially for the two characters that you get at the end. It's just, it's more of a fitting ending that, it's like where we've taken this story at that point in the film near the end, when they get to the pier at that point forward, you're just like, okay, they get away, and you're just like, yep. They you're at this point, you've just kind of, and again, I think the film picks up better once they get away from the MTV spring break camera angles and footage that we get for a good 20 minutes in this movie. It annoyed me.
It is really repetitive.
It annoyed me. I'm with you, Ian. The first chunk of this film kind of annoyed me, that when we get to spring break, that whole section annoyed me, because I'm like, when are we going to get to the story? Because I'm like, we've already
that is the story. That is the story.
Well, no, it is.
That's them being seduced and conned and cajoled and given all these aspirational images. This is what you are supposed supposed to be. And if you're not cool, you're not sexy, you're not with it. And for them, this is all about being hip. They've got 4 friends that they could just hang out with and say, hey, we couldn't afford to go anywhere for spring break. We'll just stay in college and have a fun time. They don't want to do that. What good is friendship if you can't do something really cool together? And that's what I think those scenes were, while being repetitive and even redundant, I think we're just a reiteration of that. Like, this is the game. This is what they are living for. And it seems dull to older gentlemen like us, but for these girls who this is the world they want to be in. And this is the heights.
Well, it was freedom. And I get what they were doing with the scenes. It did feel a little repetitive, though. I'm like, okay, I get the idea. It's the freedom idea. I mean, they already lead to it. They don't want to be trapped in the small town. They get to spring break, and pretty much they're showing you folks doing anything they want.
But remember, they did that before they got to spring break.
Well, yeah.
The fact that they could walk into that restaurant and rob. I mean, have you ever seen the scenes in The Sopranos in any mob movie? Some douchey crew tries to do that, and they all end up getting killed, and they killed a bunch of good people that shouldn't have. We're just robbing a poker game. I mean, it's so dangerous. It's like, I mean, I think the director just laid down the groundwork. They're like, I'm foreshadowing, and you shouldn't be surprised by anything else I'm going to show you after that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Spring Breakers, very interesting film on the surface. If you just watch like the first half hour or 40 minutes of this film, if you could get through that, there is some meaty parts at the end. I get the appeal. I get the idea and what they're going for. I think it's been handled a little better in other films, but on the whole, I'm not going to write it off or say, oh my God, I wasted my time with Spring Breakers. I found it fascinating. By the end, I just had to get through that first section of the film. Once they meet Alien, from there, that's where the film really picks up. I get what they're setting up with beforehand, but for me, I didn't quite get it into the film until Alien actually showed up. And then it was like, oh, here's where we're getting to things.
Now, Mark, as a metaphor for the show, did we lose Brian after the first 10 or 15 minutes of this, where it seemed like we were only going to be negative about?
Yeah, I mean, at the end,
Brian, where'd you go? We're come back.
We're not completely negative at all with the film, and in fact, talking with you folks and thinking about it more, I even have a little bit more appreciation of what they were trying to do with it. I'm not saying that it was actually done well in a lot of spots, but I get what they were doing with it, and it is interesting where they take the story. So Spring Breakers, there you go, folks. Wickedly wild month. Have to learn how to use my tongue, I guess.
For spring break.
Spring break's not here yet, but for Wickedly Wild month, we kick it off with an interesting film. Next week we will have our Over the Hill film, where we're going to the cult film of 1975, Switchblade Sisters, which, let me tell you, those ladies are far more violent than the ones in here. Well, more a larger group of violent folks in Switchblade Sisters. And I hope we didn't lose Jeff. We lost Jeff at the worst pose in his face. He looks
so that's just what he thinks of Switchblade Sisters.
That's his imitation of. Oh, there he goes. Okay, you froze there for a little bit. You had that look going on here. You had that look on your face, Jeff, like you were trying to channel, Chong from Cheech and Chong. You're like, nice. It was fun.
Great. No, that's.
But anyway. Next week, yes, 1975 Switchblade Sisters will be our Over the Hill special, so tune in for that. And now, as always, I give my guests their license to shill. Sorry you left, Brian. I hope you come back and maybe listen later and see that we didn't completely slam this film. But Ian, go ahead. You're first this time, sir. License to shill.
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also right here on YouTube. We do reviews and live streams and interviews and all that kind of fun stuff. And tomorrow night, I'll be talking to Jeff York, my fellow panelist here and friend, about another, I think it's an A24 film, isn't it? The Brutalist, is that A24?
It's A24 as well. Yeah.
So, yeah, we're talking about where the studio began and now where it's ended up. So... join us live on the Kicking the Seat YouTube channel, 8 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday.
Don't show your head.
That's my spiel.
Don't show your hand already, Ian. I mean, give people a little tea.
Ian the Contrarian. There's a lot of IAN at the end of Contrarian.
That's right. You can't spell contrarian without
Ian. That's right.
Yeah.
How about
That's
that? I've just given you your log line, my friend. Your tagline.
I'm changing it from the last movie reviews from Last Guy Anyone Asks to that. That's perfect.
That is. You should get that
Contrarian without Ian. That's great. That should be under the caricature did of you, and then it can be like, yeah, my fellow critic, who I disagree with a lot on some of these things, came up with this for me.
That should be a T-shirt, really. Yeah,
it could be a T-shirt.
Yeah, it could be.
How about that, Ian?
Jeff, what about you?
Ian for 5%? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Hey, just as long as you show and say, my friend did this, that's all the.
There you go.
All the money I need. Anyway, credit as credit is due. I am Jeff York. My movie blog is theestablishing.org, as you can see there. I also do caricatures. You can look up those at jeffyorkcaricatures.com. You'll see Ian is using my character of him for his profile pic on a number of places. And Mark, you will get one soon, though you don't seem to really be anxious for it. That's all right, Mark. It's all right.
Whenever you want. I ask nothing. I ask nothing of anyone. So I'm
on Instagram, Jeff York Chicago, and Jeff York Caricatures there too, which usually has the links for the movie stuff. And I also write for Pipeline Artists, do essays about the industry at least once a month, and have been doing that for about 3 years. So
there you go.
All fun movie stuff.
Fantastic. So check all of their stuff out and specialmarkproductions.com. I've got some interviews coming up. I'm dropping 3 reviews this week at least. I've got a couple interviews coming up. Katie Glidewell, the blonde in front, and I will be doing an episode, another spoiler co-review. I've been doing these lately on Companion. So that should be a fun discussion for sure. And yeah, folks, check all this stuff out and we will see you next time. So until then, we'll just say a good night, everyone.